Skyblock at its core is the ultimate challenge in resource management. You spawn on a tiny island in an empty universe.
Like Techno, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche found himself in an empty universe and presented this problem of nihilism through the allegory of the madman in the gay science. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, "I seek God. I seek God." As many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. Has he got lost? Asked one. Did he lose his way like a child? Asked another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage? Emigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. Whither is God? He cried. I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I, all of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying, as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the gravediggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? Gods, too, decompose. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed he will belong to a higher history than all history hitherto. In this case, God was the anchor of objective value and morality for society, and without a God the madman faces the realization that his life has no objective meaning. The panic and dread in his voice suggests that the madman is going through what we might call an existential crisis.
All you have is a tree, some supplies, and some dirt to stand on. You have to treasure every dirt block, because if one falls into the void, there's no way to replace it.
The 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, the daddy of existentialism, further explained the effects of an existential crisis on a person. In the concept of anxiety, he said that anxiety may be compared with dizziness. He whose eye happens to look down the yawning abyss becomes dizzy. But what is the reason for this? It is just as much in his own eye as in the abyss, for suppose he had not looked down. Hence, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, which emerges when the spirit wants to posit the synthesis and freedom looks down into its own possibility, laying hold of finiteness to support itself. Freedom succumbs to dizziness. Further than this, psychology cannot and will not go. In that very moment everything is changed, and freedom, when it again rises, sees that it is guilty. Between these two moments lies the leap, which no science has explained and which no science can explain. He who becomes guilty in anxiety becomes as ambiguously guilty as it is possible to become. Techno looks at the small amount of supplies he has and indeed feels this existential anxiety. But that is not a bad thing, because it is proof that opportunity and freedom exists in this seemingly barren world. If there was nothing he could do, he would feel nothing, but he realizes the freedom he has and so becomes motivated to go and make something new. Think about it. Why does Techno care about every single dirt block? If the world is just a void with a few pieces of dirt scattered about, then what's the point in preserving it? It's clear that the worry that Techno feels about managing his limited resources comes about due to his realization that these blocks open up a gateway to infinite creative possibilities. Kierkegaard offers a solution to existential angst in the form of a leap of faith. Albert Camus basically posited the idea of the absurd and three possible reactions to the absurd: physical suicide, philosophical suicide, or absurdism. Kierkegaard's leap of faith is similar to what Camus might call a philosophical suicide. Kierkegaard recognized this paradoxical contradiction, and so he believed that something other than reason is needed to find meaning to life. You must add an irrational faith in something into your moral system. This doesn't have to be anything spiritual, but since Søren was a big Jesus nerd, he uses the example of Abraham in Genesis. Facts and logic would suggest that you shouldn't kill a child. We as Technoblade fans know this to be incorrect.
The baby fucking died.
However, and it seems like Abraham hit like and subscribed too, since his religious brain told him to obey God and complete the sacrifice. Abraham came to a conclusion which involved a leap of faith that he would obey God and Isaac would still live, even though those two outcomes couldn't be mediated through reason. We'll examine later how existentialists take this idea of a leap of faith and secularize it to suggest the construction of individual, subjective values. For now, we could say that Techno takes a leap of faith which bypasses the inconvenient fact that he has barely any resources and drives him to begin creating something great.
As you carefully navigate your absurd circumstance, you gain a new appreciation for the few things you have as you meticulously use them to their fullest effect. With nothing but some ice, lava, and saplings, you slowly transform this empty expanse into a world of your very own.
Here you can see that Techno has developed an interesting relationship with his environment and that his circumstances have altered his outlook. Your boy Jean-Paul Sartre thought that a similar effect happened to early humans, whereby their need to survive by finding food and shelter lead to the development of a relation to the world based on need. As I said before, existentialists took Kierkegaard's leap of faith and suggested that humans create subjective value systems in a similar way. Sartre specifically suggested that human values are based on a project of scarcity, where each man does individual praxis on the things that surround them in order to negate scarcity. This is not just a natural response for survival, but a larger, constructed value system where things like competition, division of labor and class exploitation come from. In Sartre's Marxism, Mark Poster explains that matter is shaped or worked by human beings, absorbing their purposes and intentions. Sartre characterizes matter as inertia and passivity in that it simply accepts or receives human praxis. Like wax that is made into a seal by the use of a tool, matter reflects the doing as pure being there. The intentional praxis becomes inscribed in matter, transforming the living act into an inert, material fact. This is a version of dialectical materialism. And it suggests the idea that man is mediated by things to the same extent that things are mediated by man. The first part of this section describes a way in which the material conditions of a man affect them internally, but it is also the case that when the subject does praxis on the objective environment, his desires are stamped onto the objects around him, and his free will can be expressed in a way that he can appreciate. Sartre coined the term praktico-inert to describe non-unified praxis of multiple humans in a society that causes alienation of man from thing, which causes the Marxist idea of alienation, which would be cool to talk about in a video about Techno's anarchism. For now, it is enough to think of Techno's single-player Skyblock experience as being devoid of the hell that is other people, and so we can assume that all the things that Techno interacts with contain the frozen image of praxis that he likes. This could be group praxis, but here for Techno it is individual praxis. This relates to another concept, authenticity. For Sartre, whilst there may not be an objectively good way to live your life, there is a more authentic way which involves autonomy in the decisions you make. For example, you could inauthentically decide to be a teacher simply because you blindly follow your society's stated values that teaching is good, and thus you will simply occupy the role without resolving your own motivations to do it. Conversely, you could authentically commit to a set of values that uplift things like care and stewardship, and thus could more wholly adopt being a teacher into who you are. In the former scenario, you are almost in the third person, looking at a model of a teacher to follow, whereas in the latter you assimilate being a teacher into yourself and experience it in the first person, where you have a greater concern and investment. Authenticity is less clouded for Technoblade when he is not alienated to the world around him, and so he is now more able to freely develop his own meaning in the world. This seems accurate to the fulfillment that comes across in this part of Techno's speech. It feels like every placement of every block in his world is an expression of his will. Having explained the situation that leads to an existentialist perspective in the face of nihilism, I'd like to finish my analysis with a more general statement on what existentialism means for Techno in this speech. The main tenet of existentialism is that existence precedes essence. This means that people are not just a product of some essence, some substance or fixed set of characteristics that they're made of that determines what their values are, but that who they are is based on the choices that they make. An existent has a facticity, and soy, but also engages in transcendence, or soy, whereby their actions and viewpoints shape the meanings in the world around them. Things have no outside meaning but hold an incredible wealth of meaning based on the importance they have for the existent. In the case of Technoblade, he has not just found a way to keep his hunger bars full or his hearts up, but has ended up creating something that contains profound worth and in turn gives him meaning in his life. His skyblock world is not that of a natural creature, who builds a nest just so it can survive, but the project of an existent that constantly strives for something even greater, something that he can look back upon and be even more proud and amazed. Technoblade looked to the void he spawned in and, rather than succumbing to the infinite nothingness without a fight, decided that passive nihilism was for nerds and created a cooler world. Oh. And he also played skyblock sometimes. Simone de Beauvoir said that humanity is not a simple, natural species. It does not seek to survive as a species. Its project is not stagnation, it seeks to surpass itself. And I guess that applies to pigs too. I owe a great deal to Techno for broadening my ambitions and my idea of what I thought I could make of myself. Thank you, King.
Skyblock teaches us that no matter how ridiculous the odds may seem, within us resides the power to overcome these challenges and achieve something beautiful. That one day, we'll look back at where we started and be amazed by how far we've come.